You can still get your life back. Get your life back. It's real. Get your life back. Get your life back.
Hey, everybody. Welcome again to Cheryl's Get Your Life Back, or Get Your Life Back with Cheryl. And I first want to thank all of you who tune in and who are tuning in for the first time, especially those of you who are tuning in from Preach the Word Network, because I'm definitely sharing this on that platform as well. I'm so excited today. Of course, we are in a season where a lot of things are shifting and changing, and we've seen trauma and we've seen the opposite of trauma, and a lot of things are happening. And so, of course, what is being spoken about a lot, and that is a prevalent conversation, is mental health in the body of Christ. So we want to continue that conversation because we need it to be normalized, just like we normalize going to the doctor to get a physical. We need to talk more about the mental health aspect of us, because we are a holistic beings that God created. We have a mind, a body, and a spirit, and each of those parts of us are very important to take care of. You know, we're conditioned, of course, to go see the physician, or, you know, for our body, our ailments, our illnesses, and all of that stuff. But when it comes to talking about things to do with our emotions and our mindset, for some reason, it's been taboo. It's like, you know, something is wrong with you. You're condemned. You don't have any faith. You don't believe God. All that stuff we're going to talk about today. And I have a wonderful co-host to help me talk about that discussion. We're going to get into it. It's Miss Kellee-Simone Barrett. She is a therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, and both of us are Christians and we are believers as well, but we also believe in a balance. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So
And continue to push me out of my comfort zone.
That's right. That's right. That's why we co-hosting. So this,
yes,
even though this is my show platform as far as Preach the Word Network and YouTube and all that stuff, we co-hosting this together. Yes. Kelly's a therapist. I'm a mental health professional and a certified life purpose coach and a minister. And so I see it on both sides. I talk to leaders a lot in the church when it comes to the mental health thing, and even with some of them, helping them to, because, you know, especially the older school, right? Old school saints. And I just talked to one the other day, Kelly, just talking about how people need to feel like church is a safe space.
Yes.
To go to talk about what's going on inside of you, because everybody's walking around, I'm blessed and I'm highly favored. When you hurting and you depressed and you got anxiety and you dealing with stuff and relationship stuff, and you have nobody to talk to, because you feel like if you say something, people are going to condemn you. You ain't got no faith. You got to believe God. And all we do, we're so accustomed to just giving people a scripture for everything. And we know that the Bible is powerful and it's sharper than any two-edged sword and is a discerner of the intent. We know all that kind of stuff already. But the scripture also talks about taking care of your body. It even talks about healthy, how to eat right. We're disobedient with that too. So we're going to condemn somebody in another area. Then we need to look at ourselves and go, okay, that person may be dealing with this, but what about you? You're not eating healthy. You're not taking care of your body, but yet you want to be all this spiritual. We have to stop that. I'm tired of that, you can tell. And this is not to come down on anybody. A lot of stuff we do is out of ignorance, not knowing any better. We all had to learn this. Me, myself as well, and realizing that, you know, to take care of our spirit and our mind, our emotions is just as important as taking care of our bodies. Going to a doctor for ailments, going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist for emotional, even spiritual stuff, because some stuff is birthed out of spiritual stuff. So what you got to say about that?
You know, you touched on a whole lot of points. And so, you know, like one of the things I said is, you know, you push me out my comfort zone, and it's because this is an important topic.
Right.
And so, like you said, this is something that we don't talk about a lot, and it's happening across the board, and it's happening with all ages. Sometimes when you see certain things, you see it more with the elderly, because you're like, and when I say elderly, maybe older people, because you're like, that's the time that when you were brought up, this is how you were taught that you had to be. But what you find is when it comes to religion, it doesn't matter how old or young. You're even seeing people in their 20s and in their teens who are like, well, I don't need to go to a doctor because I'm just going to pray and God will heal me. I don't need to go to a therapist because either my church tells me I'm not supposed to do that. My religion tells me I'm not supposed to do that. Or, you know, if I pray, you don't, you know, God has me. I
Right.
shared with you the other day that even, more recently, even in my line of work, because I am still doing a 9 to 5 and I'm still working with clients, a lot of one of the biggest barriers now is religion. People do not want to talk to us, and
Right.
even some of the staff that we have who are not considered therapists,
Right.
because they're like, God is going to help me. I'm going to just do my prayer group every week, and that's all I need. But one thing that I find interesting with that is that, like my view is, yes, I was brought up in the church also, but God created these people to help you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Faith without works is dead. You're not doing
Yes.
anything. You can
Exactly.
believe, but if he's giving you the answer or the help that you need and you're not taking it, then
Right.
that's a problem. So like I told you, I was Googling a couple of things. And so one of the things that I found, which I thought was interesting, is that, there's this, I don't want to say not real, illegitimate, but there's a diagnosis. I don't know if you've come across it. It's called religion trauma syndrome. And it's RTS. And so although it's not a part of the DSM, there are a lot of psychologists and therapists are finding now that there is this trauma that you can receive if you're part of any type of religious practices that talk about condemnation, or that there's a punishment for whatever you believe. And so sometimes years ago, people looked at it when it came to cults and things like that.
Right.
But
Right.
they realized that it's not just about cults, it's about some of those religious beliefs where it's like, well, if you don't have faith, then you're not a true believer.
Right.
Or
Right.
I just remember even younger, like if you ask a question, well, how come I have to, if you don't do it, you're going to hell. I mean, that's your response. So,
right. Right.
Exactly. And so if you're being brought up in this type of atmosphere, although the people who are doing it, they're really not doing it to hurt you or harm you, this is what they believe, then you become now fearful that if I don't do things this way, then that means that something bad is going to happen to me.
Right.
And so you are now traumatized, which is also possibly adding to your anxiety, your depression. Is giving you almost kind of like PTSD symptoms, because your faith is what's telling you that this is why I feel the way that I feel. And then how am I supposed to get help? Because I'm supposed to believe that God is a healer. I'm supposed to believe that if I pray and fast, or back in the days you tarry, all of that stuff, and it's not working, then that means that I'm worse. That means that I'm a bad person.
Exactly.
I'm not doing anything right. And so it kind of puts you in this place where you're stuck. And if all you have to hold on to is that faith, you'll still reject the help that's being brought to you, no matter how it's being presented to you, unless sometimes it's being presented to you by a minister or a pastor. And unfortunately, generally in these cases, the pastor or the minister that you're going to is not going to be encouraging you to go to see a therapist. They're going to encourage you to continue to pray or to join this additional prayer group or to read these scriptures. And, depending if it's old school, they may tell you to come for a shut-in,
Exactly. Right.
Exactly. So it's really kind of almost like a double-edged sword. It's like, how do you help someone who the feeling is that if I seek help, I'm also doing the wrong thing.
Exactly.
So you have that part of it. And then it's about, okay, if you do finally get them to come in and get your help, another thing that I was reading about is that there's some who believe that, well, how can you help me if you don't believe in what I believe in? Because the assumption for some reason is that because we do mental health therapy or we're someone that you can talk to, and our basis and the first thing that we're saying is the first thing that's coming out of our mouth is not pray, then how can you relate to what I'm going through? Because you're telling me to do something that's against what I believe. You're not a believer. So how can you help me?
Right. That's a good point. And it really depends on what the issue is. If it's just real natural stuff that we go through, anybody, if they know how to they focusing on the issue, they're not focusing on the spiritual part. Now, it's good if you have a whole, how our clients, a lot of times we have a wraparound service. They got the doctor, they got the therapist, but then you can have your pastor, you can have the spiritual people in your life to help you in that area. And the therapist can help you in whatever that natural thing is that you're battling with. So a lot of times I tell people eat the meat, spit out the bones, but don't miss stuff, because they have specialization, training, education, experience in certain things, just like your doctor. Do you sit in your doctor and go, doctor, are you Christian? Because you're Christian, you can't perform this surgery on me. I don't really know anybody who've questioned a doctor's faith when it came to, again, going for them to help them. So why we do the same thing when that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And you mentioned that I want to look more into what you was talking about, but that's what I meant by that condemnation. Feeling condemned every time you do something. And a lot of legalistic religions teach that. People feel that way. So they end up sometimes leaving the church altogether. Now they out there, and then now you condemning them. Oh, they are what do you call it? Out there, wanderer and all this kind of stuff. When you push them out, you didn't operate in love, and ask for wisdom. Because to me, we get so caught up in, like you're saying, traditions and custom, the way we learn about or how we act in church and all that other kind of stuff. We don't really hear from God. We don't let God lead us. God, because the Bible even says a soul winner is wise. So even that, you need to say, okay, God, how can I minister to this person? You know what they've been through. You know the trauma they experienced. So when you really tune into God for real, he give you a sense of empathy where you can, a lot of stuff we learn in psychology, the word teaches us to do that anyway. Jesus always say is a kinsman redeemer, because kin means to relate. He came down, dwelt among us so he can understand what we go through. And so that's why he's that high priest who understands our pain. And he's also called counselor. So we can go to him and God, I'm not feeling well. I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with that. And God will give you the word, and he knows how to come in and comfort you. But like you said, he gave man the ability to problem solve and to help each other out. Doctors and therapists and all the other professionals out there. We go to everybody else for everything. But for some reason, when it comes to that emotional health, we got to really become more educated, which we are now, thank God, on that area, and realize what we've done. There's so much church hurt out there. And I talked to a lot of people who've been hurt by the church. And so on one hand, I understand, like you said, it's because what we didn't know and what we don't know, we afraid of. It's like, oh, that sounds spooky. Like everything is spooky when you don't understand it. Just like they used to hang people for, making herbal teas back in the days, concoctions. Now everybody's a witch. Everybody's not a witch. Now who's making money off of CBD and hemp and marijuana, all this stuff? Now, all of a sudden now we get into holistic health. When there's always been people into holistic health. The other thing I just thought about is, how because I'm talking about what they call alternative meds. And my thing is, no, everything is natural was first. Anything that come after, like pharmaceutical, that's alternative. Because that's a deviation. Not saying they don't help. Like you said, God created man with the ability to learn about science and how we can help each other, because we made from the earth. And so you have people, scientists and doctors and who know how to help the body because they study and learn the body. You have to find the balance of both. It's important.
And one thing I always remember when you're dealing with, even in therapy, or you're dealing with someone just in general who may be difficult, everyone has had that friend that goes through the same exact issue over and over. They call you for advice. You give them the same exact advice every single time. They never listen to what you say. They go back and do the same thing. You kind of get tired of it. I kind of think of it like that. It's the same thing with God. Like, I have provided someone. There are people out there who have been gifted with this. And I think that's what people forget. I love that you said that. Most of the people who are in this field, this is what we already know how to do. Just because we are in the world, this is what the world wants us to get certifications and license and go to school, do X, Y, and Z. But this is already in us. And we learn this from when we go to church. I mean, from as long as I remember, all of the things that we learn in school are things that we've already been taught from the Bible, from the word, right? And so all we're doing is now applying it, and we're in, because we're in the world, so we have to follow their guidelines to be able to provide you with this help. but that's what we're doing. We're just providing you with the tools that God has given us. And once you start to say, okay, well, you know what, maybe then let me listen. Let me see that this is what God is doing for me. Okay, God has put this person in my life so that they can be a blessing to me. And how they're going to be a blessing to me is that they're going to help me through this part of my life. They're going to help me get through this hurdle or whatever it may be. If we start to open our minds and start to think of things like that, I think it starts to make the process a little bit easier, you know. But I do also, you know, I always love to play devil's advocate. But I remember when we were talking the other day and we were just talking and just in general, like how you mentioned to someone, listen, you know, I'm glad that you took the step and you started to go to therapy, but remember, if this doesn't work out, maybe you need a different therapist. This isn't about that therapy is not working. Maybe it's the person for you. Because sometimes, you know, when we try something one time, we give up when it doesn't work. But just like I talked about that friend who we continue to pick up the phone for, and we hear the same exact story every single time, and we still give the same advice. Sometimes we have to apply that to our own lives. Okay, yes, we may continue to do the same thing. And just because we tried one thing doesn't mean that it's not going to work. Let's try something else. Let's do something different. Just like with our friend, if our friend would have listened to our advice for one time, maybe they would have a different outcome. You know? Maybe if you try, okay, you know what, this therapist didn't work, let me try something else, because what I'm doing right now is not working. Whether it be not going to a therapist, maybe it's the person I decided to go to, whatever it may be. But just because that particular thing didn't work, it doesn't mean
you have to throw everything out with the bath.
And you know, and I mean, I know, you know, even working with your clients, that you see that sometimes there's this wall that's put up, or this resistance to do anything because of a past experience. And so sometimes it's really, this is when you really need to step out on faith and say, I still need to believe that God has put people in my life, or has created these beings to be able to help us do all these things. Again, this is about going back to the basics, and it's not always about medication. You know, that's the other thing. People think it's about, oh, well, they're going to go give me a pill. I don't want to take a pill. It's not always about that. Go and see, you know, see what it's about. See, and you can go in and say, listen, you know, I'm here. I really don't want to be here. I don't want no medication. Whatever you say to me, if you're thinking about medication, I'm leaving. You can be honest and say that to your therapist or whoever it is that you're talking to, and then they should be willing to work with you to find the best treatment that's for you. Just like with your doctor. If you go to your doctor, just because your doctor tells you you have to take this pill, what are the side effects? I don't want to take that long term. Your doctor should be working with you to find out, well, what's the best plan for you? Because we are all different. And so it's about even just kind of having understanding, stepping out on faith, and starting to be an advocate for ourselves. And I think a lot of times we don't do that. We just kind of just go, and we feel that because we're here, we have to do what the person is telling us to do. But we don't. We don't. We can just advocate, talk. This is what I want. This is my expectation. And if you have a good therapist, they'll tell you, okay, well, let's explore that. Why don't you want to take medication? Why don't you want to talk to me? You just want to come here and look in my face, you know, and then hopefully they can talk with you, and you guys can work together to understand that why they would recommend whatever it is that they recommend, and what the best course of treatment would be. Not just say, well, I'm not doing that because that means that I don't have faith, or that means that I'm not, or that I'm a bad person, or this is not what I'm supposed to do. You know, this is a different way. I think we need to start looking at stepping out on faith, because like you said, it works for certain things. But when it comes to therapy, oh no. Faith, I can't do that. That means I don't believe. I can't tell anybody. How am I going to tell somebody that?
Because it was so taboo. I get why people feel shame and guilt. Then I got to carry all that on them. Like, oh my God, if I tell them, they're going to think something wrong. I can't. It's ignorance. It's not understanding. And I like what you said, meeting a therapist that you, of course, because, you know, therapists are human beings, or a counselor, coach, anybody who's helping you, they're human beings. We got personality types. If you feel like you don't fit well, it's not a good fit, because that's one thing a therapist does and a counselor can do. If you're not a good fit, look for somebody else. There are a lot of Christian therapists out there. If you need someone who is a Christian and who's a therapist or coach or whatever, then you can find that individual out there who I get. That's natural. It's understanding. It's like people that go to get substance abuse counseling. Some people feel more comfortable talking with somebody who's experienced. They understand what happens in the body and the brain and the urges and all that stuff you experience when you on drugs. And so they feel more comfortable talking with somebody. That's why I never got into, but that's not the only reason why I didn't get into substance abuse counseling. But I understand it, even though, again, I tell people, eat the meat, spit out the bones, because they still can help you with coping mechanisms, emotional wellness, finding a way to live healthier, creating a healthy environment and relationships and all that stuff that you also need to do when you have a substance abuse issue. So they can help you with a lot of other things. And you can also talk to somebody. I had a client like that. He had a regular therapist. He had me as a mental health counselor that would come by his house, but then he had a substance abuse counselor. So it was like holistic. He was able to talk to all these different people to deal with all of the different aspects.
I don't know if I've ever shared this story, and this is why, you know, I always say with everything, I play devil's advocate, right? I can see both sides of it.
Yes.
And so I remember when my child was young, we went to see a therapist, right?
Right.
And we have, like I said, I'm a believer. I have been, you know, I grew up in the church. And so of course I'm raising my child in the church.
Right.
One thing that was different is that what I appreciated is the church that we went to was really about knowing God. And like, I love that you said that before, because a lot of times you go to some of these churches and it's really about more just kind of telling their interpretation of what the word says, and not that you have a relationship and with God and being able to hear his voice and understand that this is God and this is what's happening. And so, you know, just kind of him dealing with some things. I remember that, you know, one of his things was that he hears God's voice. And he's heard God's voice from a very young age. And so that's separate from what he was going to therapy for. And one of the things that was helping him get through it was that he heard God's voice, and God was able to kind of tell him and lead him, and you know, and through that was able to guide him also to the right people to help him through what he needed, which is a blessing, which is a different side of the story. But I remember the first therapist we went to, and I'm just grateful that I had an understanding and I had people to go to kind of have a discussion with and process with. After their first meeting, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia because he was hallucinating, because he would hear his name getting called. And when he would go and see who was calling him, or he would ask somebody who like, did you just call me, when he was about to do something that he wasn't supposed to do, whatever it may be. When the therapist asked him, and he's like, and it wasn't them. And the therapist is like, well, you weren't scared? And of course, my innocent child is like, no. So she's like, why not? Because it's God. God, does God talk to you often? Yes, I talk to him all the time. So him not knowing, he's telling her about God. And the thing about it is that you would think from just even if it's, I look at, if we're not in the world, you look at, if you're in the world, you think of like imaginary friends, because that's a coping mechanism, right? As long as this person is not telling you to do anything harmful, then what is the issue? And so this I felt like if she did not understand or wasn't religious, then why didn't she put this as he had an imaginary friend that was helping him cope with what he was going through, who helped him learn the skills and teach him that he shouldn't be doing certain things or how to deal with certain things. But instead, her perspective of it was that he had a diagnosis. He was having auditory hallucinations. And so luckily, because again, we were in a positive atmosphere, we had people who could tell us, you know, who was able to, and he told me right away, she said, you know, she looked a little worried because I told her about when, you know, my talks with God, you know, so I knew about it right away. And after when I got the diagnosis, I understood. But, you know, again, I was actually in a place where I was able to also talk with other people about it. And I just realized it wasn't that it's not like he didn't need someone to talk to, he didn't need support. That just wasn't the therapist for him. Because it's not normal for someone at such a young age to be able to tell you about God and the word. And, you know how he was when he was younger. He would stop, he would be like preaching the word to people.
He was like me, exactly.
He was a little preacher. So, and although now we have social media, and I know we joke all the time, like we wish we had that when our kids were younger, because boy, they would be something now.
Oh
but
my
we
God.
didn't have that back then. So that wasn't the norm of what people saw.
Exactly.
So to see that, it was like, what is this about? But what was great was that, again, that didn't discourage me as a parent from saying, well, he needs help. And then it didn't discourage him also as a child, because he was able to come to me because he recognized from the person's reaction that they didn't really like too much what he said. And he was able to share that he didn't like that. So at a young age, he was able to tell me, well, I don't want to go talk to this person anymore, because you know, I need, this is part of what I need to do, and I'm going to talk about God. I can't have that conversation with this person. I'm not comfortable. And so, you know, kind of like from the mouth of babes, if as a young child, we realize that, and we're able to recognize that just because I may not like this person, it doesn't mean that I need to stop talking to people. I need to now find someone who I feel comfortable talking with, which he was able to find. You know, I'm like, well, you got to talk to somebody. He's like, all right. And luckily for me, he had that personality where he takes the initiative to find people we could talk to. But even as an adult, that, you know, sometimes I wish that we would have that kind of just kind of persistence and just wanting to just feel better and saying, okay, I do understand that I need something. And so maybe that wasn't it. And I need to find someone who can help me. And depending on what's going on with you, I completely agree. I feel like maybe you should, like, there are times you can look for people who are in the same faith as you. I think people forget that. There are some counselors who are under certain, that believe in certain religions. They may not advertise as such. And so you can have that discussion. There's nothing wrong with asking a therapist, you know, are you a Christian? Are you a Buddhist? Are you Muslim? There's nothing wrong with having that conversation. Even in the Jewish religion, like there are people who, you know, and not to say it like, but secretly, you know, because I've had clients who are Jewish, and, you know, the protocol, depending on the level you're in, is to speak to the rabbi, or you speak to certain peoples in there. But there are some who are still very active in that. And then on the side, which no one knows about, they're doing their private practice.
Exactly.
So I'm sharing that because it's I know that it's out there. And most therapists and most counselors, and even with, if it's a life coach that you decide to go to, a lot of times when you go to them, they have, you know, you can get like a free 15-minute, 10-minute consultation. Or even if they don't have the consultation, you're able to ask questions. If you find them on the internet and things like that. And so in your line of questioning, which should be about all the other things that are priority to you, it can be, you know, how do you feel? Even if it's not a matter of them believing the same thing you believe, but how do you feel about if your client tells you that they speak with their higher power, whoever that may be, or this is who they feel that they're guided by, and make a decision that way. Just don't assume, well, I can't share this part because my faith is such a big part of who I am. I need that to be a part of my therapy. So have that conversation. I mean, as an adult, you could have that conversation with the therapist prior, or even now, because everything is through virtual, you can do that through the email online. And the same thing when it comes to your children. We forget about that. When we think of mental health, sometimes we forget about our children.
Exactly.
It's about making sure that they have that support also. And it can be someone who is Christian, or who will understand that if your child says, what makes you feel like praying? You know, if that's what works, then hopefully you need to find a therapist that's going to work with them to make prayer a part of their coping, a part of how they deal with whatever it is that they're dealing with.
I was going to say, that's what we learned, I had to learn that too, working with clients. They may have a different faith. So I had to use that as a strategy, as a tool for them. Like, if that's going to help you feel better, be happy in your life, and be emotionally regulated, then I will encourage them, use your faith, whatever that is, to help. You know, thank God I haven't run into anything that was totally like, you know,
I've seen some stuff.
Because that's one thing I love that we talked about, you know, a lot, especially when, you know, in school and everything, it's like your own values as well. Even as the therapist, we can also choose whether I can work with this client or not, because if it's like totally against our values, I may be some dark. I know for me, what would stop me from working with a client, they into some, you know, something witchcraft or some dark stuff, because we know that stuff can jump, and I understand it. So I'll be like, you know what, I'm gonna find a therapist. That's when we refer you to somebody.
And Yes, and but what's interesting, even with that, and I don't want to cut you off, I'm so sorry, but with the
Okay, good.
referral, because I'm in this group of therapists, and it's interesting that one of the things that we're finding is that a lot of therapists they don't automatically refer, and so that could be a turnoff. But again, you could always see if it's not a fit, or based off of the reaction of the therapist, you can always ask those, do you know anyone you can refer me to? As a client, we could always ask that question also.
That's right.
Because it should happen, unfortunately, but sometimes it doesn't.
Exactly. Transference and countertransference.
And a good therapist will work with whatever.
Right, exactly.
Like we'll work with whatever. Because I could tell you some stories of some stuff.
Only if you're in my room and you letting us something, I'm like, okay, you know what? I gotta protect my heart, man. But you made me think about what I was going to talk about, the disease model. I understand why people have taboo about, like you said, therapy, because everything is about medicine, and our society and the pharmaceutical company, it's like they're big drug dealers. People, they monopolize off of it. So sometimes they don't mean the best for everybody. Sometimes you live in that age where everything is microwave, like everything is instantaneous, even though they're not really helping you. It's just helping you feel good now. But what about in the long run? So in a lot of cases, again, I tell my clients sometimes, advocate, tell your doctor, I would like to take a short run, maybe of these meds, because my goal is to be able to wean off and be empowered enough to use what God has given me inside to learn how to balance and how to manage my emotions, or whatever the issue is, unless it's something that's just, you won't even be here without medic, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, a lot of times we just run with what they say, because we still think, for some reason, we glorify doctors, medical professionals. They're humans. They do make mistakes too. So you have to advocate for yourself, because they don't always tell you the right thing all of the time. I talked to a lot of people said because they didn't listen to maybe their doctor, they was able to get help. Number one person I think about, Tabitha Brown. They gave her all kinds of treatment. She said every medication she could. None of them helped her. When she did something simple as become a vegan, that disease she had went away. They could not find it. She did a natural, holistic thing. Her faith in God, number one, she was speaking to God about it. She prayed, and the Lord led her to get on a vegan diet, to develop a vegan diet or adapt a vegan diet. Her disease is gone. Went back to the doctor, they can't find nothing. So you still have to advocate. You still have to, allow God to use you. And also, like you said, connect you with the right people. But a lot of times that disease model, and that's one thing I don't like. And that's kind of what made me kind of like, I don't want to focus too much on the mental health counseling anymore. Like if I was getting my license as a counselor, I'm not going to focus on diseases and all that kind of stuff. I want to focus on, everything else. And of course, if there's a client that I have that I feel like, okay, they may need something just to balance them right now, but I'm also letting them, I'm about empowerment. Tell the doctor or psychiatrist, you don't want to be on this long life for life, because it can affect your organs, even though they're making medicine better now, where it's not supposed to affect your organs like it used to, or they give these supplements to kind of help that. Still, there's a lot of people, they just learn how to manage, Kelly, learn how to cope. Remember what God has given them inside, because sometimes we go through so much trauma, we forgot how to self-soothe and calm, and even how to do simple things. You can therapize yourself in a lot of ways and but we forget that stuff. So we just get used to, let me take these meds. And I had a client like that, and I tested him out one day, and because he was quick, anxiety, I got to take this pill. But I said, what if you don't have your pills? What are you going to do then? And so there was one time he ran out of medication, and I had talked to him so much about self-talk and going through just thinking about all of the, because he had some mental filtering that we had to kind of work through. And I said, you need to sit and think about A, B, C, and D. If this don't work out, if I can't get to this place, what is the worst case scenario? If that don't work, maybe I can do this. I said, you can do that on your own. So one day he ran out of meds and he called me. He was so happy. He said, Miss Howard, oh my God, I kept hearing your voice. I ran out of my meds. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to lose it. And he said, I heard your voice saying the self-talk, talk yourself through, like all the stuff that I told him. I can't remember everything, but he was able to recall everything. He said, and in a few minutes, I felt good. I felt calm. I said, give God the glory, because God, we forget that because you got so codependent on the medication. The battle I have, Kelly, with medication with my clients is that what happens is it's easy for them to receive and implement all of the strategies while they're medicated. But how are they going to get empowered if the meds are not there? How do they learn to do that on their own? It's easy to comply with, I got meds, I'm good, I can, everything you're saying. I need them to be empowered enough so when they can wean themselves off or they can't get to it. I'm talking about for simple diagnosis where maybe they just get stressed real easily and they just got so used to popping a pill instead of learning how to sit down, breathe, relax, whatever, pray, do something to distract their mind so they won't go down this dark hole, so they stop ruminating over stuff over and over again. Like I have one client, she starts to count a lot, you know, and she gets really stressed, and then that becomes another problem. So just distracting the mind, like simple stuff they can do if they take the time to do it, but they codependent on the medication. About empowerment and letting them tap into their strength that God gave them, and it's hard for them to do that if they on these meds forever because they'll never learn to do it by themselves. They only can do it with the medication.
And you know, it's sad though, you know, I don't want to make this a race thing, but I'm very big on
culture,
people of color.
Right.
And even if you just do research and just see,
Right.
a lot of times that's what happens with us, you know, when it comes to anything, any ailment, whether it be mental health, medical, whatever, it's about a pill. Let me just give them something real quick, you know, and it'll get them out my office. We're not going to ask too much questions. We have to remember that doctors do get some kickbacks from prescribing these medications.
Exactly.
Because these people, these that's true. People think like that's not real. I don't know if you've ever been in a doctor's office when the pharmaceutical sales agent is actually there with the medication trying to get the doctor to utilize it more. And so because of that, they're going to just give us this pill. They know we're not going to ask a question. And guess what? We're going to keep coming back. So that's a guaranteed payment. That's a guaranteed form of payment. And so unfortunately, a lot of people use, whether it be their medical profession, their therapist practice or whatever, as just a means of an income. And so that may be why they're saying, well, let's take this pill. And we don't know, like you said, we don't know to advocate for ourselves. We don't feel empowered. We don't know that we have a right to ask a question and to say, well, how long do I have to be on this? I don't want to be on this. What are other, and we don't even know to ask, are there other things that I can do besides be on medication? And unfortunately, society has taken advantage of that. And so it's great that when clients meet people like you, who, although they're on medication, you're not just about, did you take your meds? You see that there's a issue that maybe this can be also helped with something outside of meds. And not only do you acknowledge that, you teach them the tools regardless. And so what will happen is exactly what you said happens. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen as much as it should, which I think is also what pulls people away from just getting therapy in general. And so because people have had that happen or may have had that experience or have witnessed someone in their family with that experience, and they've had an adverse reaction to medication, whether it be now you go down that rabbit hole, because now I had a family member who now started popping pills as a result of this, and it didn't, you know, or they were never the same, or they started to look different, or they became whatever it may be. It now deters them. And so they're like, well, the only thing I'll have to get me through it is my faith, because that's where it comes down to. Unfortunately, some people, even those that aren't overly religious, you know, these are the people that you never even know believe in anything when it comes to an issue, when it comes to their mental health. Now they're believing on their faith. You're like, huh? But it's kind of because, again, that's just kind of, that was the coping skill of your family that you've been taught. And so that's just what you resort to. And so, you know, I just hope that even people who are watching this can kind of remember that there are different scenarios that everybody goes through, but it's really about being empowered and knowing that you have your, you know, what your rights are wherever you go, whether you go to a doctor's office, even if you go someplace holistic, if you go get a massage, you have rights as a patient. You know, I work in the shelter system. Even when you go into a shelter, you have rights as someone who are there. Every place you go, you have rights. It's that book that back in the days, it used to be this thick book they used to give you and we never look at. Now everything is electronic, you know, we just sign. But take take a look and stop and look at it, you have a right to ask questions and to say what you want and what you agree with and what you don't agree with.
That's
And
right.
once we begin to realize that, then we know that we have say in what we do with ourselves. So our treatment is going to go how we want it to be. Now, when it comes to medication, I am a firm believer in, I am not one to push medication. I've never been one. I have actually worked in inpatient
Like
psych.
as the
I have worked
only
in outpatient
right.
psych, you know,
Right.
and I'm saying that because I've worked in places where people were forced to have medication.
Right.
And I've worked in places where, you know, that's where you're so, you know, the thing is you treat them so they can, while they're on their medication.
Right.
But fortunately, I've always worked with people who believe that medication is not the end all be all, and that there are a lot of holistic and other things that you can do instead of being on medication. But I am a firm believer and you may need medication for a moment, depending on what you're going through. So just like how you shared, there's some people who have so much stuff that's going on top of this and this, you know, sometimes the medication will help you start to come to a place where you can begin to process and peel the layers to understand what is going on within me. Where does this fear stem from? You may think that now that you're 50 years old, this is something that happens because something happened to you at 40. No, this could be something that happened to you from as young as 5, as young as 4. And when you talk to a therapist, they'll be able to help you go through that process to find the root of what is causing what you're going through. But you and once you start to get to the root and start to peel those things, then you can get weaned off the medication while also learning tools and coping skills. So also while you're on these medications, it doesn't mean that, you know, you have to be completely dependent on them. And I think a lot of people don't realize that as well. So that they're fearful because a lot of times it's just, let me just get medication. For anyone who is watching us, you know, I encourage you, if, you know, a lot of times people just refer them to the psychiatrist. And that's it. And so whenever I hear that, I'm like, so who's your therapist? What therapist? No, I just go to the psychiatrist. I may see an NP every so often, but that's just some of the psychiatrist is just there to basically keep you on medication. They're there to manage that medication. You need to get the additional tools so that you can learn how to cope. And so I find myself always having to tell people when I meet them, like, no, you need to be having these sessions. Like, do you feel a difference when you, I talk to my psychiatrist, like, okay, what are you talking about? You know, they feel that because I'm getting both from my psychiatrist. Sometimes you're not. So if you are even in a position, or you've been in a position where you're seeing someone who's prescribing you medication and there's no processing going on, there's no one who's getting to the root of why you feel the way that you feel, who's allowing you to kind of start to shed some of the things that you have that you're going through, then you need to see someone else on top of that. And then with them working together, you should be able to get to a point where you don't need the medication anymore. Again, it's just for me, I just believe it sometimes it's needed to just kind of get you to that place so that we can start to unravel, because sometimes, especially when we have people who experience trauma, or, you know, especially when you're dealing with some of the other diagnoses like the bipolar disorder, the schizophrenia, things like that, you know, sometimes, and not to say that you'll never have to be on medication, because the reality is that there are some people who may have to be on medication because it's a chemical imbalance in your body, and the medication that you're taking should be a pill that is balancing out whatever your levels are. It shouldn't be something that's making you walk around like a zombie.
Exactly. And that's the
making
problem.
You have cotton mouth, nothing, or you
have a
don't
quality
feel
of
like
life.
yourself. Your quality of life is going down, like you said. And so if you find yourself in that position, again, just please don't give up, you know, say, well, this is not the right thing for me, and look for someone else. If you're on any of those type of medications and you're dealing with things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, even some manic depressive disorders, don't just stop the medication also, because again, this is a chemical that you have now put in your body. And so to just stop it, it's kind of like putting a shock to your system, and it can be harmful to you. But it's about now finding someone to help you wean yourself off of this medication. And again, so this is really all about advocating for yourself and saying, this is what I want, and we need to be realistic with it. And hopefully, you know, and my prayer for everybody is that they will find someone who will be honest with them to say, you know what, the reality is that you are going to have to be on medication. And they can explain to you why you have to be on medication. And you are able to make that decision together to say, okay, this is what's needed in order for me to have a better quality of life. But just don't be so discouraged and dead set against it. If it's something that again, is being recommended to you from someone you trust, because we also have people who maybe like, I was, I had a great therapy experience. I was seeing this person for years, and then they wanted me to take medication, so I stopped. So this was someone you trusted for how long, and now that they've recommended this, explore that with them. They're probably coming to a place where they feel like this is going to help for you to get to the next phase of your treatment. Because again, we're not supposed to be in therapy for our entire life. Like that's not how therapy is designed. And I think some people think that also. This is something that I'm supposed to be in, from now until whenever. No, I mean, you have people who go to therapy for, a couple of months. You have short-term therapy and you have long-term therapy, but it's not forever therapy.
Exactly.
And I think some of us sometimes forget that as well.
Right. Look, you can get a second opinion, just like go to a doctor. You know what I'm saying? So, advocate for yourself all the time. Do your own research. And so finding a balance, even with the medication, like maybe I'm supposed to be on for 3 months. He just said, take the omeprazole. I didn't get how long or anything. So you have to also, you love yourself. You have to take care of your body as well. Like I said, these people are professionals. It don't mean they're perfect. They know all, they have the end all, be all, whatever. You can talk to different professionals until you feel comfortable, or talk to somebody you feel like is giving you the best advice for you, like Tabitha Brown did after she took everything. And those things can cause harm in the body, but just simple as changing her diet. Because even eating right, and that's a whole nother holistic thing. There's natural things you could do, like Kelly said, that can change the chemistry, change the way your body responds to a whole lot of stuff. So a lot of our issues can also come from a protein, or it's a whole lot of information out there. You have to do the research. But you made me think about the reason why I started going with my clients to the psychiatrist, because from when I was little, I remember what I knew about psychiatrists, they didn't only prescribe medicine, they will also have a session with you and talk to you about your issues. And so what I found by going with my clients to advocate for them is that I'll see the psychiatrist, the office full of people. I mean, Kelly, the office is jam-packed. There's no room to sit down, and people coming in and out the office real quick. I'm like, well, then I saw my client come out quick one day. I said, well, what did the psychiatrist say? Oh, she didn't say anything. She just wrote me a prescription. I said, what? Did she ask how you doing? How you progressing? Now you got all these other services. They're supposed to find out if it's helping you, if you made any progress, if the medication is helping you, not just come in and go, okay, here's your next, go to the pharmacy and get your prescription. I said, what the heck? So I started going in with them and sitting in the session, and I saw it for myself, just quick to write up. I'm like, why? Yes, they're able to give you, a prescription for meds, but they also train, like therapists, a lot about the body and the brain and all of that stuff to help you. There was nothing. I couldn't believe. I said, she just making money, honey. It was just like, it was so crazy. I was like an ATM.
And I think part of it is that one thing I learned,
she was taking on more than she can handle. Go ahead.
So I think that plays a big part. And I think what I found when I knew what I was called to do. And so I had to find what the worldly title for it was, right? And so initially I thought it was a psychiatrist, because growing up, that's what you would hear. Yeah. And so what I've realized, and what I realized even back then when I was looking, is that people have their own perceptions of what they think people do. Right. And so they are psychiatrists who do therapy. Because I have found some, but there are a lot more of them that just provide medication. Only for medication management. That's what their focus is. They can see more clients. And that really wasn't their focus too much. The therapy part wasn't really what they focused on in school. Right. Well, that wasn't what they were like, no, that's not my ministry. I'm just going to do some pills. Because back in the days, people go, I talk to my psychiatrist. I talk to my psychiatrist. There's no talking going on with a lot of them. Exactly. And so a lot of times, and so I think another thing that I would encourage people to do is kind of look at, what are you really looking for? Because even when it comes to psychologists, people are like, well, I'm going to go see a psychologist. And they're like, well, all they did was give me a bunch of tests. Well, depending on the type of psychologist you went to, that's what a psychologist does. But again, because people think, this is what you say. I went to the psychologist, I went to the thing. And I've even to this day, when I have clients who come in and they're like, yeah, I see a psychiatrist, and they're not seeing a psychiatrist, they're seeing a social worker who happens to also have their PhD in something, so they're Dr. such and such, but they're a social worker because it's the one who's providing you the therapy. But because no one's really saying that, you know, I mean, sometimes and that's why sometimes I intentionally say I'm social worker, but a lot of times people just will say I'm a psychotherapist. So they assume that I'm a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but social workers are psychotherapists because we are trained clinically to be able to, we know all of the stuff. In our training, we also learn about medication and things like that, because that's part of what we want to discuss with you, because we technically what should be happening is we should be working in conjunction with the psychiatrist and the psychologist. So we do need to all kind of learn some of the same things.
That's right. That's why you're able to
focus
assess
more on the therapy and the, and so again, because we're so used to, because we assume it's doctor, and even with our regular physicians, we do it. Like, oh yeah, I went to my doctor. What was he? Oh, a doctor. But you don't know that you're going to a specialist. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
No, that's a rheumatologist. That's an internist. That's a cardiologist. You know, you just put them all in one, under one lump. You know, just also, again, just do your education. And then, you know, because you were talking about just, you know, do your research. And I'm always I always encourage people to do their research, but I also encourage you to be mindful of where you're doing your research and who you're getting connected to, because I've realized that just as much as you will find people who are going to steer you in the right direction, you're also going to find a huge community of people who will steer you in the wrong direction. And it's so many of them, you won't know that it's the wrong direction. And so, you know, I would encourage you, when you find people we have this site right here, you know, you look at all the videos and see, oh, did Ms. Howard say anything about this? Maybe I could see if there's a YouTube video on that, because I trust what she says. Everything she says, it seems to be right. Tabitha Brown, perfect example. You know, she's on a lot of social media, TikTok, Instagram. And so when you look at that, you don't normally look at that as a viable or a scholarly type of place to look for someone to trust or to get information from, but then you're able to follow her journey. And so if you really look and follow and see her journey, and then also do research on her to see what's going on, then you see, well, let me see what she's doing. Maybe I can try and follow some of the things that she suggested. Just be very, very careful. And another thing I would also encourage people to do is, you know, and I, as an introvert, I'm saying this, that I know that it's difficult to do what I'm saying, is that you want to try to find not like-minded people, but you want to try to find a community of someone who will kind of that you can trust to provide you with the right information. So one of the things that you shared, Cheryl, is about, you know, you did your research and you saw
the meds
itself, and you saw that this is what it did. And so it's interesting that you said that, because one of the things that I am now, you know, I'm now really big into a lot of the holistic and the herbs and things like that. And what makes me know that I'm on the right path when it comes to that is because of you, because from years ago, you know, you were really, really into it. So, you know, you hear about it, you like, you don't need a pill. And I'd be like, huh? And lo and behold, you'd be right.
because we have pushed away God's natural medicine, and you know,
and because you and that was something, and so for those of you that think if this is she is not just putting this on for social media, this is her belief system. This is how she's always been. It is genuine and it is real. The only thing that may have happened, of course, because things change. So, you know, you're not talking about it as much. And so, you know, of course we get older. So we're like, well, what do you use with this? So, you know, we have to probably go back. But that's what triggers in my mind when I hear about certain things. I'm like, oh, Cheryl used to talk about that back in the days when she had that particular issue, and I started to get it, and she shared that with me, and it worked. And so, you know, if you can find people who can give other alternatives to medication that are trustworthy. And one of the things that's also great, you know, you have the pros and the cons with social media is, if you're an introvert like me and you don't have those friends that you have met, because especially with COVID now, you may not hopefully be interacting and meeting too many new friends like you were before, but there are Facebook groups, you know, there's Instagram groups, there's different groups where you can meet people with like conditions, and then you kind of feel out what you're going to go with and what you're not going to go with. And I would encourage you to join numerous groups. I mean, I have a chronic health condition, a chronic medical condition, and, you know, it's not something that a lot of people have. And so I'm in a couple of social media groups, Facebook groups for it. And so the reason why I like to be in a couple of them is because a lot of times you'll see common themes within the groups. And then there's always that one group that you have nothing but honest people, and the responses will let you know, oh, that's not the way to go. And so this is why I say, try to join a couple of them, and there's a group for everything. I know people have this thing called Clubhouse now. I mean, it's not that new. It's not old. I don't know if they're using it like they used to, but that's also a form that people are finding to meet with like-minded people. But if you know that there's things or there's symptoms that you're feeling and you don't know what it's called, or you're like, well, I'm having these things and I'm supposed to pray about it, but that's not working like it should. I bet you there's a group for it. Probably 4. Join 3 of them.
Exactly.
And then
You
find people who are, and you want to find positive. You don't want to find anything that's condemning. It's like, well, you're not trying hard enough, or this is what you need to do, or this is why I'm so negative. You want to find the groups that have positivity and are sharing things that have worked for them, and that there are numerous people where they found that it works for them. Because again, I know it's not easy for everyone to go out there and meet people and be social, but it does help, because when you start to hear these things, like I said, for me, that's what kind of helps me. And that's why even with me through my practice as in therapy, is my thing is about, let's think about what naturally we can do. If you're not to the point of medication, let's try some of the natural things first. And I'm sharing that because so you can see that there are therapists out there who think like that. If that's the way that you want to go, it's not going to be about, well, let's go see a psychiatrist. It's about, well, let's look at something natural. And the reason why I'm like this is because I was around people who introduced that to my life, and and it's something that I've seen that has worked. So just meet people and the right positive people, and just kind of continue, like the theme through the whole thing, I believe, Cheryl, is it looks like just be empowered and just kind of advocate for yourself. Because I think we forget that, especially when it comes to mental health, because there's also that stigma, not only in the church with mental health with some people, it's also in the world, like I'm not crazy, and I don't want to be looked at like I'm crazy. And so, we want to just know that just because you're dealing with some symptoms or feeling, or having some experiences that other people are may not be having, because that's always our perception. No one knows how I feel. No one else is going through what I'm going through. There's always one. There's always somebody else out there, and sometimes just connecting with that person and finding out what works for them, or if they were able to find someone who was able to help them, so that you can get a referral and you feel comfortable that way. And that's something I would also recommend.
I wanted to talk about the importance of having, like, we came from a church that have like therapy. We have ministers who who are psychologists, or like Dr. Lucas, who's a psychologist and a therapist and a Christian counselor. Just the importance of having that type of ministry or position within a church, and people who are trained leaders. They're not only ministers, but they're also trained in mental health, but also creating an atmosphere for people in the church to feel safe, like have these conversations. I want it to be a place where we can go and talk about these things. This is what's bothering me, or I'm being abused. And, because the church did come a long way. Back in the days, again, it's ignorance. People dealt with abuse. They had to repress stuff because the church taught, well, that's your husband, or you're supposed to take that. And nobody want to say anything. And then when something happened, everybody's like, oh my God, what happened? It's because she kept coming to church and saying, I'm going through this, my husband is hitting me, or whatever. And you just want to spiritualize everything. And that's the stuff we have to stop doing. And it's killing people. People walking around feeling condemned. And yeah, I'm passionate about it because there's so many people that are hurting, and they don't feel like they can talk to their pastors and people in church about these things that they're dealing with. When it comes to emotional stuff, when it comes to relationship stuff in their families and all this stuff. And it's like, that has to stop. I think it's very toxic. Yeah. And yes, things are changing, but we still got to keep having these conversations. And that's why I said normalizing it, getting help, getting counseling, whether it's therapy, or maybe you don't have something that's that serious, and you maybe need to talk to a life coach. Now you have trauma-focused coaches. You got coaches who just focus on giving you strategies in certain areas, but you can talk to a therapist if you have a deep issue that you need to explore and root up and pluck out, because that can be very traumatic. And that's why it's important to have a therapist in those situations. But if you just need some life skills and some tools and strategies, something that you can put into practice, and you need to talk to a coach or somebody else, maybe you're a pastoral counselor, which I am too, that you can get that spiritual counseling. But a safe place, church should be a safe place that people can come to, because we all come with soulish issues. We come with trauma. We're born in trauma. The Bible even says we are born and shaped in iniquity. We're born and shaped in sin. That means we're going to experience dysfunction. Some of us are in dysfunctional families. We dealing with generational stuff. How do we deal with that stuff? So yeah, maybe a person in the secular world may not be able to help you. Maybe that unless they are Christian, they understand that there are spiritual things that transcend through generations. But we need to have that in the church where you can deal with all of that. And that's what I want people to get Kellee in the church and see Jesus as that counselor. That's what he deliver us from. Trauma, generational stuff, generational patterns of mistakes and cycles and all these things that we battle with, not understanding where it comes from. And we can be so much more powerful if we take care of the spiritual and the natural together, the integration of psychology and theology. And when I did my study earlier on, when I was studying counseling and human services, one of my favorite subjects, and I have a book on it, was the integration of theology and psychology, and how a lot of psychology actually stem from theology. Some of the modalities, even though some of the theorists were not Christians, but a lot of them adapted a lot of their modalities out of, and I found it in Scripture, like the renewing of the mind. Like when I think about cognitive behavioral therapy, that's the renewing of the mind. Then you may prove what is God's good, and all these things that when you change the mindset and things in your spirit, then you start to behave different, then you start to react different, then you start to respond. So yes, the word is powerful. Let me tell you, the word is powerful. And sometimes, like Kellee mentioned earlier, when you tried everything else, that word is there, you return to your faith. Because we all have our own journey. Some situations we come to, God is saying, come to me. He heal all manner of sickness and diseases. And you need to have faith like that. So by all means, wherever you do, even if you're seeing therapists, taking meds, I want you to walk in your faith and believe God, because God can do exceedingly and abundantly above all we can ask and think. He is a healer of all manner of sickness and disease. He can't pluck up the root. And we know people as well who had miraculous, healing in their body, that supernatural thing that God did for them that nobody could do. And God did it himself. And so we do need to go back to that faith that we read in the Bible in other countries when they can't get to medication. Their faith is because of their faith. You see limbs grow back. You see all these miracles, again, because they're not codependent on the meds. They don't have access to what we have access to. So we become so codependent on all of these things. That's another side of it. We forget who God is, and he's powerful. We will see more miracles today, and we all really believe. So don't misunderstand us. We believe by faith with all of that. God, remove me from this. Heal my body. Let it function in the manner in which you ordained it to function.
Amen.
Walk by faith. Absolutely.
I think it's important for religious leaders to understand that, they do have a say in what happens in their church. They can talk about it. One of the things I, loved about the church that we went to, that you went to when you were up here, was that I used to hear a lot of different things about the church, and they were like, I'm not going to that church. People, they bougie. Oh, the energy is this way. And it's crazy, but I'd be like, well, where do you sit when you come to the church? And based on where I'm like, you know what? Come over 3 more pews and tell me what you experience. Because sometimes we equate the people who we sit around to be what the church is.
Yes.
Right. And so you could be sitting with those group of church mothers that's all about, that can believe. And I hate to keep saying like that they will condemn you, but you can have it. No, we got to pray for that one. They got to, after everything. That's what we got to pray for sister. Because you see her creeping in here. Now, if that's what you're sitting with, and that's what consists of the first 3 pews in front of you and the 3 rows behind you, you're thinking that's the entire church, because that's your group, whether you realize it or not. And so you're not understanding how you know, and so we sometimes get confused. We're like, but I know I heard that this was going through something similar, but they got through it. Guess what? They probably saw a therapist on top of it, and it could be someone in the church. But
Right.
because you sitting in this group over here, you're
Right.
not realizing that they really did something a little bit different. The people
Exactly.
who you sit around in that particular section may not be what the entire church is feeling or believes in.
Exactly.
And one thing I loved about our pastors is that they would call stuff like that every so often. They would talk about those people who would act like, oh, you know, how you gonna come to church being mean to people because they in your seat? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly.
They have these behaviors. Or you sitting here supposed to be on the
Yes.
ushers ministry, the motherboard, and you talking about people. You know, it's okay, and it's not to say this is not about them condemning people, but sometimes we have to, just like a parent does, you got to call people out on their stuff to let them know that this is not right. And even though it's going on, I see it, it's not right, and it really won't be tolerated. They don't kick anybody out the church, but they speak on it, which gave me a feeling of, you know what? Well, I know this is not how everyone feels. So sometimes it's a matter of just changing where I am and who I'm positioning myself with, because I find that the people of the church, the leaders of the church, that's not their points of view. And so one thing that was a blessing for me is that the church would be a place where you felt safe. Like I remember, like I talked about with my son, like there was certain things that we were in church every single day because that was needed, because sometimes just sitting in that space is what would be relaxing, would help you to get the thoughts together. And I do agree that we've come away from that, but we do have to remember, but again, I know there were certain times that I couldn't be in the church because I'm like, oh, I know the group that's there, that's not gonna work right with me, and it makes you feel a different way. And so as leaders, you know, I would want us to start to acknowledge that, because not all of the leaders of the church are acknowledging that. And I really hope that we also will start to listen to when we hear things about other ministers, or we see that other ministers are doing behaviors that are not according to the word. Because again, I'm all for pastoral counselors and counselors in the church. But again, it's just like with anybody else, maybe that's just not the right pastoral counselor for you. And sometimes the churches have more than one. Like I know our church had a couple of them. And so it's a matter of who's a good fit for you. And it's not about, and if you go to a church and you don't feel safe and you don't feel comfortable, and you want to explore and see, well, maybe is there another church that kind of has the same beliefs that I have, but they do have pastoral counseling. There's nothing that says that you can't explore other churches. It's fellowshipping, you know what I mean? I also remember, and even from going to our church, I remember there were a group of people, because we used to take, you know, we were really, I was really active with the kids, as you know, so we would go to different churches. And so but we had some mothers of the church who felt like that should not happen, because it was kind of like,
way of thinking.
I'm like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And these are some of the same people that come to our church, you know, when we have our youth conferences, when we have our adult conferences, our women's conference, our men's conference. So if we can come together for that, why can't we go and support and visit your church and have those experiences? And so I think we have to get out of that mindset that if we go to a different church, it's kind of like that's a negative thing. Because you may be surprised. You may find something at the other church that you like. Not to say that you don't like.
Sometimes they don't want that to happen.
But that's the thing too, you know, and so it's okay, you know.
Exactly.
I'm saying it as like another option to say, even if you're like, I want to stay in my church, and you know, I know I can't talk to anybody about what I'm going through, but you feel like I still need to be able to talk to someone in a church. Find another church that won't judge you because you're having issues, because you're in a relationship with someone that you feel you shouldn't be in. And that's something that's going on. And we have to remember too that you know, sometimes some of the mental health issues that we're going through is from abuse, and abuse can happen from anyone and by anyone. And I think people forget that a lot. You know, again, I work in a shelter, and we've had a lot of people who've come in, unfortunately, because of abuse from the church, from members of the church. And so this also kind of turns them away, because they're like, well, no one can help me, because if my church couldn't help me, how can anyone help me? And it's about, well, you just probably need to find a different church. You need to find a different person, because that just wasn't the healthy environment. And
Exactly.
again, this is why I say, I think that the leaders of the church at some point, they may not know everything that's going on, but with discernment, and if you're praying and you're doing everything that you're supposed to, you know that something is not right in your church. And so when we're praying for everything else, when we have our prayer list, and we're doing our weekly sick and shut in, why can't mental health be in that? Because if someone is having a hard time and they're faced with depression and they can't leave their bed and they can't get up every morning, then why aren't they on that list either? Just because Susie can't get out of bed because she has the flu, if sister Sarah can't get out because she's facing depression because of whatever, it should be the same, you know. And so I would encourage everyone to start to kind of look at it. And if we start to speak more openly about these topics and and have these conversations in the church as well, I think it will help. And it's not about saying, well, you need to go see a therapist. It's just to acknowledge that these things exist, and you know, we can pray about it, and I can give you some scriptures on it, and with that, pray before you go to see a therapist. If you decide that you know what, God, I don't know if you know, I hear these ladies talking and I'm not sure, pray. Is this for me? You know, and if it is, please lead me to someone who is going to be the right fit for me, who will understand, who will not make me feel judged, who will not make me feel embarrassed, who will not make me feel ashamed. Say those prayers. I always encourage people, though. I mean, I would hope that's part of your daily prayer when we pray about everything. Sometimes I think we forget about that. Have that be your prayer before you're going in. And hopefully the person that you're going to see, their prayer is that when you see them, you see the God in them. You see what you're not seeing them. You're not seeing any judgment or anything else, but what you're seeing is what God has purposed for them to share with you.
Exactly. That's real good. Just like we pray before we meet with our clients, because we don't know.
But yeah, we do. People think we don't, but we do.
And prepare ourselves as well. So we're emotionally regulated because we have stuff too. It's just that when we're trained to help people, any kind of helping profession, we learn how to compartmentalize and tune into our client at that time and put our stuff over here. And you need to be with somebody, you know, that's a whole nother conversation you can have too. You can spot that out if you go see a counselor, therapist, or whatever, and they talk about their trauma and stuff. That's like, okay, well, you know, I need to find somebody else. People are real human. They got things going on. And so we also have to practice self-awareness. Where am I? Maybe I can't meet with this client today. I gotta you don't know, we go through the same stuff you guys go through. But you know, we just learn how to compartmentalize, because we don't want to harm you. We don't want to harm the people that we work with. And sometimes you harming people by putting your trauma on their trauma. They coming to you for help. But that's why we have to take care of ourselves. Anybody in the working profession, that can be a lot of different, that could be an attorney and what's the word? Empathy. Preparatory empathy is that we already thinking about our client before we meet with them. What they're going to feel, what they must be going through. That's why sometimes you come into a therapist's office, they got the room set a certain way. They use a certain color, certain lights, because they're thinking about the client first. I want my client to feel comfortable. If I'm working with a child, I want to have things that are kids friendly. So when they come in, they don't feel threatened. Like, oh my God, I don't talk to this person. They don't feel scared. They come in and feel comfortable and have fun. And then you can start working with them. A little bit, it says the conversation about mental illness is becoming more prevalent in our society, and that's a good thing. The National Alliance on Mental Illness reports that approximately 1 in 5 adults in the US, that's 46.6 million, experience mental illness in any given year. Mental illness, while not easily defined, can range a plethora of different hindrances and disorders that make normal everyday life challenging and or borderline impossible for the individual. For the context of this piece, the disorders I will reference, and those are more common in our larger discussions as a society, of course, you know, is depression and anxiety. What does the Bible say about mental illness? The conversation on mental illness and its validity have been controversial at times, especially among those within the faith. It is important to note that the Bible never explicitly speaks about mental illness in terms of how we would define it in modern times. Even so, more churches are experiencing the effects of mental illness within their congregations. Treatment and care have been topics that many have debated. And while these questions are not easily answered, the Bible provides insight on how we should view and respond to those who are battling with their own minds. Mental illness can be a physical issue. We know that one of the consequences of the fall, and I always go back to the fall when people ask the question, why would God allow this? And why are we dealing with this and death and stuff? And it's like, you have to go back to the fall. When we fell from God, when we was disobedient and man didn't want to listen to God, then we reap the consequences of sin, being disobedient. And yes, we can go into Adam and Eve and all the other kind of stuff, but because of the fall of man, we deal with illnesses, we deal with sickness, and we deal with diseases, unfortunately. God's good and perfect creation of our bodies. Okay, so I'll give you some scriptures about the corruption and God's good and perfect creation of our bodies. Our earthly lives are limited, and eventually our bodies will fail us. This also applies to our minds throughout the scripture. We see biblical figures such as David, Job, Elijah, Jonah, dealing with deep feelings of despair, anger, and depression and loneliness. While some of these things can be attributed to spiritual warfare, it can also be of a physical nature. Since we know that our bodies are prone to go awry at times, it's possible that what we are experiencing is related to chemical imbalances or other things happening within our brains. And those are the things we need to be reminded, and just instead of just throwing scripture out there. Okay, you can put scripture out there, but find scripture. The Bible does have scripture that we can apply to our mindsets or our spiritual issues and our physical issues. We can profess and confess, just like the scripture talks about us being healthy, eating the right things, doing things the right way. It can help you live a happier or more of a healthier lifestyle if we do apply. Sometimes we don't even apply scripture. There's a lot of things in the word of God that teaches us how to live life the way God wants us to live. And that's down to the diet, to our mental, the way we think about things, the way we believe things, like Kelly mentioned about joining the right groups. If you're in a group that's very toxic and it's all negative, that's going to affect you, have an adverse effect on you. But if you join a group that's positive and they sharing information and things that can help you, you can have a whole different experiences. So you have to be mindful of all of those things. I just think it's important because I do believe the Bible, there is an answer for everything, but the Bible is not the only thing. Like your shirt says, God, or prayer and therapy. God created
God
this is
and therapy.
Therapy. That's the reason why I wanted to. Just even though I'm a pastoral counselor, I thank God that I also have training in other areas like trauma and different things, because how I wanted to help the church, Kelly, is I wanted to be able to bring both the spiritual and the natural. And so that way I can help people within the church, and just have that kind of the availability just to be there for people, so that way I can talk to them about certain things and I can give them both. And so we can start doing that more often. Then we can have, the church can be so, just that place that people can go to for almost every problem that there is. And so we need some more leaders in the church who are therapists, who are psychiatrists, who are life coaches, who are pastoral counselors, and they have some form of training of how to help people. They have a understanding of the human development from childhood stage to adolescent to adulthood and on. So this way we can still help people a lot if we just normalize all of, like what we're talking about, therapy and counseling and everything else. But
to even say, just like how you got into, part of what you wanted to bring to ministry was that I'm from the other's perspective, is that although I am not a pastoral counselor and I don't present myself under the name of like a minister or anything like Christian or spiritual, that is also why I do, and I am trained in what I'm trained in, is because I want people who are in the world to understand that, we do have a God, and there is someone who is constantly watching over you and who can help you and who can protect you and who can heal you. And so, my private practice, my business name is KB's Lighthouse. So it's based off of my name, Kelly Barrett, my lighthouse. And so part of it is based off of the scripture, let your light so shine before men, because that's what it's about. It's about, when I want my clients to see God in me. I want them to come to me and be like, well, how come she's like that? Why is she like so bright? It's something about her energy. It's something about whatever they call it. But what it is it's about what God, it's that they're seeing God through me.
Yes.
They're seeing that what his works can do. He has provided me with these skills to help you, and I can help you process this through another way. And hopefully through this, you'll understand that there is another way. So if you believe in something else or you don't believe in anything, I'm hoping that by the time we finish going through whatever our process is that you understand that, you know what, I know that I can be a better person. I know that I can be the person that God called me to be. And I may not even realize that, you know, we all have a purpose. God puts us on this earth for a reason. And so through my work and through working with me, it is the hope that people are able to find their inner light is what I talk about. And the light, as we know it, is God. You know, he is the light of the world. And so that's what I want people to get from coming to therapy. That's that feel good. That's what makes us say that we can be okay. And so just like that's what I want and that's what I believe, there are a whole bunch of other therapists out there who feel the same way. So please do not be discouraged. Do not think that, you know what, I can't do it because I'm going to, and I think a lot of time it's that fear. And so it's okay to be fearful, but please just like we continue to talk about, advocate for yourself, ask questions. I know that even, like I said, I'm in a group with a whole bunch of therapists. And so, I'm in a couple of groups with therapists of all races also. And so it's interesting that a common question in this group is, what do you do when your client asks you to pray with them? You know, and so it's very interesting on people's standpoint on it. And so one person had a response, and so they were like, basically they tell the person that if the person wants to pray, they will sit with them and pray, but they just won't do the praying for them. And so I can understand that also, because I know sometimes, especially as a Christian, and being in the church, sometimes, you know, you hear when people be like, you hear, he praying? That's not of God, you know. Because everyone has their perception of what prayer should sound like and look like. And so now imagine you have this connection with this therapist and they pray and you'd be like, wait a minute. I was good with them till they prayed.
Especially if you're not saying you're a Christian therapist. It's like, oh, okay.
And so even if they are, and these are people who are believers, you know, they are, you know, but because we have to also, again, we know that unfortunately some people have these unknown biases. You know, you may not even be aware of it. You be like, I don't even know what it was. We were going good, but I don't know what happened. And it may be because of that prayer that they said. But you can, if that's what's comfortable for you, you can ask your therapist that. Is it okay? Like, I would feel more comfortable if I could say a prayer before we start. And even if you're having a hard time finding a Christian therapist or a therapist who believes in whatever your beliefs are, if they don't want to pray for you, you can ask, is it okay if I say a prayer? And you don't even have to say anything, but if they're okay with being in that space with you, then that can also be someone that you may consider. So please just, again, I encourage you to just feel empowered. You have rights as patients, as clients, and just do your research. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
We got to talk about some more.
Yes, I definitely enjoyed this conversation. I know Cheryl always says if you have any questions or comments, you put it in the comment section below. And the same goes if there's any questions or anything that you have for me, you can also put it in her comment section below. And just thank you for sharing the space and this time with us. Okay, so right now you can find me. My Instagram is KB's Lighthouse, and it's exactly how it sounds, the letter KBS Lighthouse, LIGHTHOUSE, and that's on Instagram. Everything else is pending right now, but if you go on there, you see that I post mostly on my stories right now. Again, it's a work in progress. But if you have any, again, questions or anything like that, you could always send me a DM or just put it in the comment box below, and we will be sure to get back to you.
Awesome. And me and Kelly are working on a project, and we're taking our time with it because I want it to be of such value that you will find help. You get the spiritual aspect. It's really helping you with that mindset. It's a transformation type of program that you go through, and it's going to deal with some trauma stuff. It's going to deal with generational stuff and relationship stuff. And so we really just going to provide strategies and tools to kind of help you. And it's like self-paced. You can go through as many times as you want to. That's, I think, how I want it to be right now, to get the help you need. And once you signed up, you in it for life. And I wanted to be such value. So I have people that I'm pulling in to bring their expertise. It is not just me. I have a psychologist. I have Kelly's a therapist. I have some spiritual leaders as well. And we're just really going to provide a lot of stuff. I want it to be, you know, something that other churches can use as well. Like other people may want to use it as well to help their people or whatever. So, and it takes a while to build something like that. I didn't want to just put it out too quick, but at the same time, I know that this is the season to get it out there because people really need help and to find support. And because there's a lot of things we're doing virtually now, it's a virtual academy, Get Your Life Back Academy. And I have other things in there right now that you can also join, like different, I have different courses and classes and on a lot of different topics. But this here is focusing on the mindset transformation so you can have a better quality of life, so you can be healed from a lot of things that's holding you back, that's keeping you prisoner and, you know, in your own mind, and you're not living life to the fullest. You're not living out the life that God called you to live, and you're stuck in a place. And so we want you to become unstuck spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and everything else. So I can't wait till that comes out, and I'll talk about that again some more. But you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, saying Cheryl, Get Your Life Back, all over the internet. So thank you so much for tuning in. This kind of went longer than I wanted to, but you know what? It's going to be very helpful to somebody. And share this with other people as well. This conversation has to continue. And so one way you can continue the conversation is to share it, and you have a discussion about it as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining in Cheryl's Get Your Life Back. I'm so happy. Tune in again. If you follow me on Preach the Word Network, I come on every Friday at 8:30 a.m. live on TV. And then also I save those same conversations on my YouTube channel, Cheryl's Get Your Life Back. And you can see it again in case you miss it. You can also follow me on YouTube, and that way you can hit that bell and get those notifications every time I'll upload a new video. Thank you so much. Be blessed, everybody. Bye.